Hi everyone, welcome back to TechRaptor. I'm George, I'm joined by Dylan.
Hello.
Now, TechRaptor's own Austin Souther wrote a fantastic review of the Isle of Armor DLC on our website, which you can check in the description below. But Dylan, if I didn't know anything about this DLC, what can you tell me? What is the Isle of Armor?
Yeah, so as you alluded to, it is the first section of the DLC for Pokemon Sword and Shield. So what they've done is they've released an expansion pass, which includes the Isle of Armor, which released, I think it was June the 17th, and the Crown Tundra coming as part of the expansion pass sometime this autumn.
So typically with Pokemon games is we would sort of get two games released at the same time, for example like a Pokemon Diamond and a Pearl, and then a couple of years down the line you would get Platinum, which would sort of be a kind of definitive edition sort of deal where you were getting basically the same game but a few more features. But if you wanted to actually explore those features, you kind of had to play through the whole game that you played last year over again and build a whole new team of Pokemon. But it seems like this is sort of their new approach to tackling that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this is completely replacing the previous kind of sequel within a generation system that we had.
And so instead of paying for a whole new game, we're just paying for this expansion pass. And how much does that cost?
So it's £26.99 for both. So that's including Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra.
Right. And so... So what do we get in the Isle of Armor? What do we get in that first part of this DLC package?
Yeah, so it's basically from Wedgehurst Station, which is one of the first areas you come to in the main Sword and Shield story. If you have the expansion pass, you can take a train to a new area. You get carried the last bit across the sea by Corviknight, and you arrive at the Isle of Armor. It's its own self-contained area. Totally separate from the main story, and essentially what it is one large wild area. For those of you who aren't aware, the main Pokemon Sword and Shield had a cool new feature, kind of the most important new feature that's been introduced, which is a big, kind of not open world, but more open than the fairly linear Pokemon storyline that you had before, where you can run around, come into contact with loads of different Pokemon of all different levels. It's got different environments, and somewhat crucially, it has a free camera. So it's not just a fixed camera like you would have in all the other areas of Pokemon Sword and Shield and in all previous games. So the Isle of Armor is just one big wild area with a couple of kind of key spots.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. The wild area is easily the best part of Sword and Shield. But how does the story of Isle of Armor kick off? How do we get into things?
Yeah, so you arrive at the train station. You're greeted straight away by Clara, or Avery, if you played the Sword and Shield. The Shield expansion, which I didn't. Clara and Avery are basically your main rival in the DLC storyline. So you meet her, have a quick battle, then you go over to the dojo, which is kind of the main hub. That's where you meet, it's not Professor Mustard, just Mustard, his wife Honey, and a couple of other cool characters at the dojo. And that's where you kind of get your quests. The story kind of revolves around that as a hub.
And so these new Clara and Avery characters, do they replace Hop from the main game, who was the previous rival, who was just a bit pathetic, to be polite?
So yeah, Clara is kind of the equivalent of your rival or companion, Gary or whatever the guy was from Gold and Silver, etc., etc. Spoiler alert. Unfortunately, Hop does... I don't mind him. Unfortunately for people like you, and I know there are a lot of people out there, Hop does make a reappearance. A little bit later in the story. He's got a kind of minimized role to how he does in the main game.
I kind of like that they realised that he's... because he gave us loads of memes. I like at least that they're just being like, here's a little bit of him, but we're not going to push him too much.
Basically.
So what is this new area like? What kind of new environments are we getting in the Isle of Armor?
Yeah, so I think this is actually one of Isle of Armor's strengths, is that the wild area, it looks great. It's kind of what I think a lot of us, a lot of critics, a lot of fans hope the wild area in Sword and Shield would be like. It's got very well realized different areas to the game that you can explore. So it's got deserts, it's got caves, you can get on your bike and sail across the sea, find loads of little islands, stuff like that. And it all looks really, really good. What I will say, it still uses the same assets and the same textures and stuff like that as Sword and Shield. So the trees still look pretty bad.
And you can hop off to the Isle of Armor at any point in the story, right? Am I right in thinking?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So as I say, you access Isle of Armor by getting the train from Wedgehurst Station, which is the second kind of location that you get to in the main story. So what's really cool that they've done is they've scaled the Pokemon level and the level of the trainers that you face in the DLC so that you can face it at any point. You know, you could start your quest off and then you could go through and do the storyline for Isle of Armor pretty much straight away. You could leave it until you complete the main game like I did. So that's I think that's a clever feature, and it's something that we've not really seen in previous Pokemon like mainline iterations of the games.
Right. And obviously when Sword and Shield initially was revealed, there was a big controversy around Dexit, in that we I think it was something like 400 of the original Pokemon aren't even present within Sword and Shield. Not just are they not available like until you've beaten the Elite Four or anything, they're just not even like coded in. You can't even transfer them from your previous games, and that caused a lot of controversy in the Pokemon community. We're getting some of those Pokemon back now, right? They're starting to add a couple of those back in, right?
That's right, yeah. So there's 105 new Pokemon arriving with the Isle of Armor DLC. So you've got some old favourites like Stoutland makes a reappearance. Personally, a big fan of him. Zorua, Zoroark, plus some more of your kind of classic 151 original Pokemon like Kangaskhan, Tauros, Chansey, Pokemon like that.
I'd like to note, if anyone from Game Freak is listening or watching, I am very still annoyed that there's no Dragonite or Ampharos. Two of my favourite Pokemon are still not present. They better be in Crown Tundra, or I'm rioting. I'm throwing a riot.
Surely Dragonite will be there. Surely.
Yeah, he has to be, right? But also the problem that I'm starting to worry about now is that there's something like 400 Pokemon that weren't available in Sword and Shield. Yeah. They've added 105, you said, right? Back into the Isle of Armor. Yeah. And I assume they'll probably add another 105 or whatever into Crown Tundra, or maybe 150 or whatever. But that's still going to leave like 100. It's still going to leave like 200 Pokemon not even in the game.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen there? What's going to happen with that? Do you think that could be something they'll patch in? Like, what do you think will happen?
Yeah. So I think there's still a little bit of speculation about what's going to happen there. From what I've seen people with Pokemon that weren't previously available. So like you can get Mewtwo and stuff like that now. So I believe they've patched it so that you can through Pokemon Home, you can transfer Pokemon from previous generations in. So although you can't catch all 800 Pokemon in Pokemon Sword and Shield, they are now available, and that's not restricted to if you have the DLC or not. So you can.
Right. So with the DLC, we can catch those Pokemon in the wild, but we can't. But also if you don't have the DLC, you can transfer them if you had them in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, right?
That's right, yeah. Or previous generations, basically. Yeah.
Cool. So, okay, I'm thrilled to hear that. Maybe eventually, by the time Crown Tundra comes back, I can take in my Dragonite that I've had since Black and White. My beloved Dragonite.
Yes.
That would make me very happy. So what are you what are you kind of thinking are the main drawbacks to the Isle of Armor? What are the things that have kind of upset you a little bit, have bothered you a little bit?
Yeah. So like I suppose there's an argument to be made that a lot of these features that they've released with the DLC Isle of Armor, like your Pokemon following you around, which is something that they've added in, which is really, really cool. You get to a point in the campaign. Campaign is my slightly grandiose term for what's a couple of fetch quests basically. Anyway, once you reach the end, you get the ability for your Pokemon to follow you around, come out of the Pokeball, and fly, run, skip, crawl after you, basically, which is it's just really nice.
So we're getting follower Pokemon returning from Let's Go, right? Yeah.
But maybe that should have been introduced. With Sword and Shield, there's been a lot of criticism, although it was generally well received. There was a lot of criticism at the beginning that the beginning of Sword and Shield's release, that it was a little bit rushed. And I think you can see that with the Isle of Armor. One thing that's so enjoyable to play it is it kind of adds in a lot of the things that were missing at the beginning of the release of Sword and Shield. So, like the wild area, like I've said, is very well realized, good to move around in. You can finally now access the rest of the Pokemon. Some of the textures, like I said, still aren't great. So graphically, there's definitely a lot that can be done there, and it's a bit of a shame that you can't. So when you Pokemon follow you around, you can't. That's only within the Isle of Armor. When you go back to the mainland of Galar, it's your Pokemon don't follow you around anymore. So that's restricted to DLC, which I think maybe they'll patch that in future. It's a little bit unfair.
Now, Dylan, when I go on the Twitters, I'm seeing lots about this Cub Fu fella, and I haven't, he wasn't in the main game of Sword and Shield, right? Cub Fu's new to the Isle of Armor. What is Cub Fu? Who is he?
Now, Cub Fu's a cuddly little fighting bear type Pokemon. He's legendary for the Isle of Armor, and there's a really cool quest which you kind of go around the island, looking at the nice views, getting a warm fuzzy feeling with your Cub Fu running around behind you, and you're just kind of building up a bit of affection with him. Which I think is
like an Empire Strikes Back, like Luke running around with Yoda, right? Like they're sort of bonding.
Basically,
talking about their feelings.
Yeah. he eats all your food, basically.
And the interesting thing about Cub Fu is that he's a legendary that can evolve, right?
Yeah, so that's what the Tower of Waters or the Tower of Darkness. That's what you get. Once you progress to a certain level of affection with your Cub Fu, you choose whether to take him to the Tower of Darkness or the Tower of Waters. He evolves, but you can choose whether to evolve him into a fighting water type, which I think is the multi-strike form, or you can take him to the Tower of Darkness, which he becomes a fighting dark type Pokemon, the single strike form of Urshifu, which is basically a big kung fu bear. It's a nice design. I like it.
So one last burning question I have that is going to be the deciding factor of whether or not I get the Isle of Armor, Dylan, is Ball Guy back?
Unfortunately, Ball Guy does not make a reappearance in the Isle of Armor DLC, which is, will be a great disappointment to many.
Yeah, I love Ball Guy. I love popping into a new place, just getting a friendly hello from Ball Guy. Oh, weird man, a little man with a weird Pokeball for a face. But in summary, you're generally quite positive about the Isle of Armor, right? Like it's kind of giving you a lot of what you kind of initially wanted Sword and Shield to be when it first released. Are you kind of maybe a little bit disappointed that this is a paid DLC that you kind of wanted really more so in the main game initially?
I wouldn't say I was that disappointed. I played through Sword and Shield. I liked them. I think Isle of Armor does a lot to kind of, makes a lot of improvements on Sword and Shield. Like I think the story's better. Some of the features it adds in are cool. The quality of life stuff is cool. In terms of value, like it is really good value. Like $26.99 for 2 DLC. That's the RRP. That includes Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra, which I assume will be just as big, if not bigger, in terms of content. Like there's a good.
Yeah, I've heard Crown Tundra is going to be much chunkier.
Yeah, so in terms of content, like if you rush through it, there's probably 5 to 10 hours just of the main story. For completionists, it's probably closer to 15 or 20. If you want to look at competitive stuff or catching shinies, you're looking at loads and loads and loads of new content available to you. So I think overall, especially when you compare it to previous generations where you're paying 40 quid for basically the same game, getting 2 chunks of, pretty meaty, entertaining DLC, I think it's great. I'd recommend anybody who has Pokemon Sword and Shield to pick it up at some point if you like Pokemon. It's not going to do anything. It's not groundbreaking. It's easy. Pokemon games are all easy, but it takes what Sword and Shield does well and kind of
improves
builds on. Improves on it. It's got. At the end of the day, you just want your kind of cuddly Pokemon, your favorite Pokemon running around behind you, catching new Pokemon, and obviously Game Freak realised that that's their strength, that's their brand, and they're just kind of running with that. So yeah, overall I'd say I really enjoyed it.
The Pokemon Sword and Shield expansion pass is available now on the Nintendo eShop. The Isle of Armor content is available to play now. The Crown Tundra content is scheduled to be released in the second half of 2020. Don't forget, if you want to read TechRaptor's official review of the Isle of Armor content, you can check out Austin Souther's review in the description below. Thank you very much for watching.